Hello, Thrill Maxers, and welcome to another exciting episode of Talk Around the Park. It's been a little bit of time since I've recorded one of these, so I'm so happy to get back to the show. I love the park we're going to talk about today. It's all about Knoebels, and just like all the other shows, we're going to have a local expert on the show with us, and we're going to welcome back today Chris from Coaster Appreciation Society. Chris, how are you doing today?
Doing great. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. We're both surviving this social distancing thing, and these shows are working out great.
Yeah, we're starting to see some good news from parks in certain areas.
Yeah, things are starting to reopen. I'll be at Mount Olympus this weekend. I went to Pigeon Forge last weekend, rode some mountain coasters. So things are starting to open up. Things are coming back to life. So hopefully more states and more parks open soon.
Yeah, hopefully.
Including the one we're going to talk about.
Yeah,
I really hope, because so sad. I was about 4 weeks out from my East Coast trip. I was going to hit Knoebels, and I did not. I was not able to go on that trip. Obviously, I had to cancel it because of everything going on. I'm so excited to be able to talk about it and at least live the park through my research. So let's jump into this. As always, the first section of this is always, what audience is the park geared towards? Chris, since you know the park better than most, why don't you go ahead and answer this?
This is easy. It's a family park. It's probably the most unique park I've ever been to. If you haven't been, it's a bucket list park. Throw out that they've only got 6 coasters, including their kiddie coaster. It's about so much more than that at Knoebels, and you can't, until you've been, it's hard to really fully understand.
Yeah. One thing, and I didn't ask you this, but it's okay if we backtrack a little bit. Tell everyone, how do you know Knoebels?
Well, ironically, I'm not really a local. I mean, I grew up in Maryland, about 2.5 hours from the park, and didn't get my first visit there until 2 summers ago. And it's a park that I'm dying to get back to, because I only had one afternoon there. I did manage to get my 100th credit on Phoenix, which we'll talk about Phoenix later, because that's pretty legendary. But it's, I'm sure there are many that know the park far better than I do. I've had one visit, but fell in love with it. And it's a place I can't wait to take my kids to, because the day I went up by myself, and I can't wait for my kids and my wife to see it.
Yeah. But don't let that fool you guys, even though Chris has only been there once, because he is a enthusiast. He knows what he's looking for. He can judge a park just like any of us enthusiasts can, based off, a visit or two. So just because he's only been there once, don't discredit that. Chris definitely knows what he's talking about. So I'm excited to jump into this. So back to the question of what audience the park is geared towards. I couldn't agree more with you. Through my research, it seems like, even if families don't have money, and we're going to get into this section a little bit later in the operations, but even if you don't have money to go on all the rides and do that stuff, if you just want to take your kids, go sit on some benches, have a nice little picnic, you can totally do that at Knoebels. And so they are in the mindset of just get to the park, just come enjoy our little park that we put together here.
Yeah, you can literally park your car, walk through the gate, experience the atmosphere of the park, and not spend a dime.
Yeah. And that's cool, because you can't do that at very many parks anymore in the country. So that's really cool. I will say that this park, there's so many aspects that look like Roller Coaster Tycoon. I mean, it looks straight out of Roller Coaster Tycoon. It looks like they just plop down a bunch of rides. It looks like they're handmade. The little shops and everything, all are themed to whatever they're selling. So there's a lemonade stand. It looks like a lemon.
Yep.
There's a bread stand. Looks like a slice of bread or a loaf of bread. And so it's so charming. If you guys ever want to figure out what it would be like to really live in Roller Coaster Tycoon, get to Knoebels.
Yeah, that's a great analogy, because and getting there is an experience, because it's in the mountains of Pennsylvania, in the middle of nowhere, and it's like you're driving down this back road, and all of a sudden you open up in this clearing, and it looks like a big county fair with a few major roller coasters dropped in the middle of the fairground.
Oh, totally does. Absolutely does. And people don't think of that when you think Pennsylvania. You don't think of rolling hills and mountains, and you don't think of all that when you think of Pennsylvania. So it's just a cool setting for people. So we kind of touched. You kind of brought up some major coasters. So let's jump into the next section here, which is the park's ride lineup. And man, this was almost an endless treasure trove when I was doing my research for this park. Yes, they only have 6 coasters. They do have a couple of water rides and the flat ride section. I mean, I ran out of, I don't know if you can see this, but I ran out of room at the bottom of the flat rides. I wasn't even totally done yet. And I already had a dozen flat rides. So this park is big on their flat.
Yeah, and selection. To me, that's the place to start. And what's so cool about it is a unique collection of flat rides. It's not your plug and play flats that you see everywhere.
Right.
And I think you got to start with the Haunted Mansion. This is the typical old school dark ride with all the gags you expect. Including the head-on collision gag towards the end of the ride. It's fun. It's about as well done as any Haunted Mansion outside of Disney. And of course, it's not on the same level because they don't have the technology, but the charm, the nostalgia, it's flawless.
Yeah, and it doesn't look, when you look at older Haunted Mansion rides, a lot of them look real cheesy, real dated. This one actually looks really well themed and looks really, really cool on the inside.
Yeah, they are really good with the upkeep on it. Interesting thing about the Haunted Mansion is that is the one ride in the park that is not included in the Ride All Day wristband.
Really?
Yeah, and it's my understanding is while the Haunted Mansion sits in Knoebels property, there is actually a third party that operates the Haunted Mansion. So, which would explain why, at least that's the best explanation I've gotten from anybody I've talked to, is that it's a third party that actually runs it. It just happens to be on property at Knoebels.
So that's, that goes to the overall theme of Knoebels. Knoebels is an old school kind of park, and that business model of third parties coming in and running attractions is a very old school kind of business mindset. If you go back to Knott's Berry Farm, that's actually how they started their rides. They had a carousel. They started off with just a carousel and some other stuff. It was all a third party. It was all a independent person, right, guy of the park who would invest his own money, and essentially Knott's would charge rent, right, for them to use the land. And so they would operate it and own the ride, and then Knott's would own the land, and they would profit off that. And when you get into something like their Calico Mine ride, that almost didn't open the way that it opened because the guy had to privately fund it, and he started running out of money halfway through. And so that's a very common thing with old school parks. So that's really cool that Knoebels still has one of those attractions like that.
Yeah, and I think I want to say it's like $250 a person to ride it. Drop the money, ride it in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
The one thing I learned the day I went, I didn't want to fool with doing all the math, so I just bought the wristband because they have one wristband that's everything but the coasters, one wristband that includes coasters, and then of course neither of them include the Haunted Mansion. But unless you're going to ride a ton, you can probably get out cheaper on the ticket system there. You just got to be willing to take the time to do the math and figure out what you want to ride.
For sure. And we'll talk about kind of how everything operates and how people can get on those rides here in just a minute.
Yeah.
But they're flat rides. They've got some other, what's cool about them is they have some classic stuff. They have some modern stuff. And then they've just got some real neat stuff. So they do have a Larson flying scooter set. A lot of people just call them flyers.
And they let you snap them.
I was about to say, this one, they let you snap them. And man, I've seen some videos and they really snap.
Yeah. I've never seen them tell somebody to back off. So
yeah, and one of the videos I watched, the guy was like, "Yeah, the operator was telling me not to do it, but he wasn't doing anything to stop me. He didn't stop the ride. He was just saying, hey, cut it out." Okay. So it just seems like a very fair kind of atmosphere there.
Yeah, very much.
I've heard great things about their drop tower. They do have a drop tower. It's called Stratosphere.
Yeah.
Did you ride the drop tower?
I did not. Like I said, I was there one afternoon and I had one goal, and that was coaster credits, including number 100 on Phoenix. And I lost about an hour of the day getting onto flying turns, just because that ride always has a line. But it's not a huge drop tower, but it's the kind where you're very exposed, not a whole lot of restraint system there. And it's the kind where once you get to the top, you just drop. You're not sitting there waiting, so you just go.
Yeah, and that's what everybody says in my research with all the videos I've watched. Everyone's like, "Oh my gosh, this is a sleeper hit for the flat rides. Get on this," because that drop, as soon as you get up there, they said it's really a forceful drop. So, but they call it Stratosphere. Let's see, what else do they have?
Well, they have their bumper cars are considered the best at least the best in the country, if not the best in the world.
Yeah. Their bumper cars look super cool.
Yeah, they are the very old school style cars. You're going to get thrown around in them some. But they're pretty famous for those. We already talked about the flyer.
Yep. They have a couple of old school rides, like they have a paratrooper ride, which is really cool. They have a really beautiful looking carousel.
Yes, the carousel is, of course, they've got the famous try to grab the brass ring. So that is definitely, I'm looking through their list of rides too at the same time.
Yep.
Thing.
2 or 3 actually old school. They have something called a Rotojet, which is a smaller version. If you remember, Disneyland when it opened had in Tomorrowland they had those Astro Jets. Yeah, and it looks like a smaller version, a kiddie version of that. But it's an old school flat ride. They also have the Rolo planes. And I don't know what they call it there.
Yeah, and there's their version. I think they call it satellite there. Because most of the versions of that you find in the fairs, it's just basically you're going through a vertical loop, and some of them the capsules rotate, so you're never upside down, and some of them the capsules don't. These they actually go on an axis to where it's more like that sometimes, and instead of being straight up and down. Very unique version of that ride.
Cool. It's like a T-bar.
Yeah,
and on either side you have the Rolo planes. Is what I mean. That's the only thing I know to call them.
Yeah.
And then it spins, and then those cars spin. So very weird, but you can tell totally old school. Flat ride. And then what I think, when I think old school, this is like the epitome of old school, and that's the Whipper.
Yes.
They have an old school whip. If you ever been to Dorney Park, they have the whip there. It is one of my favorite old school flat rides. It is so cool.
Yeah, for something so simple, and the forces it pulls whipping you around the corners is is crazy.
Yeah, unbelievable.
That's a classic one that they have. Another one of the really unique ones they have is the Looper.
Yeah.
Which I'll be honest, even if I had had the time, there's no way I would have gotten on it because I had to drive home and I would have probably been throwing up all the way home. But I don't even know how to describe it other than you're basically in like a hamster wheel and you're facing the person you're riding with and they go around the track and then your hamster wheel can spin. I mean, you control how much it spins. In fact, and not to talk about another YouTuber on here, but if you saw Theme Park Worldwide's trip last year that he did across America, the Knoebels video when he gets Alex on the looper and he's playing like he can't figure out how to get it to loop and then all of a sudden towards the end of the ride, he just unleashes it and they just start spinning like crazy.
Yeah. If you guys don't know what we're talking about, but you're familiar with SBF, if you look at IAPA this year, they actually have one of these on the front of their train. So as it was, or the front or the back, I forget, but one of the cars was this hamster wheel that did spins, did flips. Funny story about this type of ride. They used to have one in Seaside Heights on the boardwalk. My dad had a house 2 blocks away from the, 2 streets back from the beach. So, and it was probably a 20-minute walk to the beach or to the boardwalk. So we used to go down there a lot. And they had one of these. And I was a kid and I must have been, I don't know, 6 years old, 5 years or something like that. And I was just tall enough to get on one of these. And I was so scared at 6 years old. And this one, you couldn't really spin it yourself. This one it was on an axis and that spun. So it would always spin at the same place on the ride. So this thing, we must have did 40 flips. I mean, this thing was incredible in the 3-minute, 4-minute ride we had. Mm-hmm. And I was so scared. I actually went to the bathroom. I actually peed myself on the ride. And so yes, Mr. Thrill Maxx or Mr. Take Your Thrills to the Max, peed himself on a ride as a kid. Nice. And so anytime I look at that, it just immediately brings that back. Like, I don't know if I want to get on that. Last time didn't work out so well. Now they also have, I really want to talk about this one. They also have a really cool indoor flat ride. And this is called the Cosmotron. Mm-hmm. And it is a Matterhorn type ride, but it's all indoors. It's got music and lights. And did you go on this at all?
I did not.
Oh yeah. The coasters were on
yeah. I was there for the coasters that day. I mean, I got a good walk around the park and kind of a feel for everything that was there, but I didn't get to ride as much as I would have. And that's the ones I would have taken the time to ride just for the uniqueness of it.
Yeah, for sure. And that's kind of the theme, some parks, Magic Mountain, don't have very many indoor rides, and they have a few. Actually, they have the Haunted Mansion, then they have the Cosmotron, which is indoors. And then later on, they also have an indoor roller coaster, which is really cool. Yeah. Before we get to the coasters, though, there are 2 water rides there. Mm-hmm. One of them has the best name. I mean, Sploosh. They have a shoot the chute ride. It's called Sploosh, which is just an awesome name. And then they have a log flume called the Giant Flume. Mm-hmm. They both look like they're their standard log flume and shoot.
Yeah, I mean, they're fine. There's nothing that stands out about it, but at the same time, even that part of PA can get pretty hot. So I think it's smart for them to have that. There is also a pool at the park. I mean, they don't have a water park, but they actually have a pool.
Wow.
You have to pay extra to go in it, but that's there as an option too, because there's campgrounds all surrounding the park.
Oh, so okay.
Pool kind of functions for the park and for the campgrounds.
I see. That's neat though. You don't see very many theme parks with a pool people can just go chill in.
Yeah, you don't. And you don't see theme parks with dogs walking around either, but that happens at Knoebels.
Right. Um, so if you're looking for ways to cool off, they definitely have a couple of ways there. But let's talk about, we're going to now jump into their coaster lineup. And there's arguably one throwaway, I would say, and five really, really standouts.
Yeah.
So their throwaways, their indoor coaster. This is called Black Diamond. If you want to call it a coaster,
it's a coaster in the same vein as Blazing Fury and Fire in the Hole.
Without the drops,
there is one small one, but nothing even as big as those.
Right.
I'll be honest, of the six, that's actually, I wouldn't call that a throwaway. I would actually call Cosmos Curves the throwaway. Just because Black and Cosmos Curves, I mean, it's a kiddie coaster. It is what it is. It's like a 2 or 3 lap special. And it's fine. But just the uniqueness of Black Diamond. It is one of the most bizarre rides I've ever done. In fact, the day I was there, I went through it twice because I was, you finish the first one, like, what the heck did I just go through?
Yeah. And it does look very themed. It looks very, that's, in my research, that's what everybody said. You don't ride it for the ride, you ride it for the experience.
Yeah. It's just strange. And, the one kind of tunnel effect in there is actually really well done, with kind of the spinning tunnel as you're going through it. But again, it's well themed, but it's a weird theme, which is why, I was like, yeah, I need to go through a second time to kind of see some more.
Yeah, the reason I said throwaways because actually the kid coaster, Cosmos Curves, I have heard that this thing for a kiddie coaster is surprisingly forceful. I've heard that the airtime hills at the end, they say, you're not going to actually leave your seat. You kind of move forward, and it kind of, they said, for a kiddie coaster, they say that is a fantastic kiddie coaster.
It is. It's a good kiddie coaster. I'm probably overly hard on kiddie coasters because, for one, when you're a guy my size getting into those cars, every little force is going to exert some level of pain at some part of your body.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's the neat thing, they've got like this little boat ride that kids can get on, and Cosmos Curves is kind of built over top of that canal in parts where you're kind of interacting as the boats go under. So it's still a kid coaster, but yeah, it's, I prefer like the Woodstock Expresses or whatever they're calling them now at the Cedar Fair parks.
Oh yeah.
But
yeah,
for what it is, it's, it blows Coco Cruiser at Hershey out of the way. I can tell you that.
Yeah. But then they have some family coasters.
Mm-hmm.
So that's not everything the kids can get on. They have a couple of more rides. One of them is, I guess we'll talk about Twister next.
Okay.
Because I think, you could say Flying Turns, but we'll go Twister next. Because Twister, in my mind, when people think of this park, Twister's almost an afterthought.
Mm-hmm. And that's a mistake.
Yeah, people say, people think of, Phoenix and Impulse, especially those two, in Flying Turns the most. But tell everybody about Twister. Tell everybody, why is it a mistake to just dismiss or forget about it?
Well, to start with, Impulse, as cool of a ride as Impulse is, Impulse would be my 4th best coaster in that park.
Okay.
Twister is a solid number 2. Phoenix is my favorite Woody. It's my 100th credit, whatever. But Twister and Phoenix are 2 completely different rides. The lateral forces on Twister are nuts. It has this huge sweeping double helix that kind of wraps around the station about 3/4 of the way through the ride.
Mm-hmm.
That is insane. I don't know that I've ever felt those kind of forces on a wooden coaster's helix before.
Really?
Yeah, it's very forceful. And it's a unique wooden coaster. It's not, it's not your typical out and back classic, but it's also not really your typical Cyclone style coaster. You've got the split lift hill, which, okay, it's a gimmick, but it's cool. You've got that huge helix, and you really have some elements of both Out and Back and Cyclone all wrapped into one really, really good wooden roller coaster.
Yeah, and if you look at the lift hill, you just mentioned the lift hill. Is that not exactly what we used to do in Roller Coaster Tycoon? Like, oh man, I need to I need to split this lift hill up. Okay, this is what we're gonna do, right? We're just gonna make a little turn here.
Yeah.
So yeah, I agree. I do like. I mean, it obviously focuses on laterals more than airtime, but you in the same park, you have an airtime machine over there, so you don't need something that focuses.
Yeah,
on
it's the perfect complement to Phoenix, and there are a lot of people that like Twister more than Phoenix. And I that's not me, but I can see where that argument stands. Twister is a phenomenal wooden coaster. And for a park that has 6 roller coasters and you've got 2 phenomenal wooden coasters sitting there across the park from each other in the middle of nowhere, Pennsylvania, it's really cool.
Yeah, no, for sure. And what's cool, if you look at each of their coasters, they all focused on something different.
Yeah.
Black Diamond is your indoor, it's focusing on the experience. You have your kid coaster. You've got Impulse, which focuses on the inversions and that vertical drop. You have Twister, which focuses on laterals. You've got Phoenix, which focuses on airtime. Everything focuses on something else and just fits together like a good puzzle.
Yeah, and one of the neat things about Twister, and I mean, it's not even part of the ride, but part of the experience, is the way the queue is designed. The queue actually goes all up in the structure. The entranceway goes right through the outer part of the structure, and then you're kind of in and out of the structure as you make your way through the queue to get to the station.
Again, very Roller Coaster Tycoon-ish. That's how we used to build the queues in there, or at least me when I first started. But that's really cool, and it's cool that they have another wooden coaster, that focuses on that. That's really neat. But technically, they've got 3 wooden coasters, so we're gonna save the best for last. But let's talk about the next wooden coaster, which is a very unique wooden coaster. You don't see this every day, guys.
No,
that's Flying Turns.
In the making too.
Oh my gosh, yes. If that's why we probably don't see many of these wooden bobsled coasters. But why don't you tell everyone about Flying Turns? How is it? Is it forceful? Is it what can we expect on Flying Turns?
What you can expect on Flying Turns. I'll be honest, it's not terribly forceful. It's another one of those rides that the experience is so unique that that part overwhelms the fact that it's not incredibly thrilling. I mean, I think the top speed's doesn't even hit 30 miles an hour going through it.
Right.
I like it better than like Avalanche, the bobsled at King's Dominion. I like Flying Turns more. I think it's a smoother ride, which is really strange considering it's wood versus steel. But it's just, and maybe it's the shorter trains too, because you only have 3 cars per train. The structure itself is just so different to be inside there going through the ride. There's a reason it always has a line.
Yeah, and it looks, because I've been on some bobsled coasters in my day, but this one looks super forceful. When you see the POVs and you see how high they're getting up on the sides and stuff at some points, it looks super forceful.
Yeah, you go up on the sides really, really high, but I think part of it too, they actually weigh every rider to make sure that the weight is dispersed on the train. And I think that plays into it not being quite as forceful as it goes through there. Because I like you, I was expecting it to really kind of be not jarring, but really feel it going through there. But it's a really smooth, fun ride.
And rare.
Yeah.
Just a rare credit to get. I mean, if I'm all about if something is that unique and rare, I don't care how it's going to feel. I just want to get on it just to say I did it.
Yeah, and if you're going to visit the park, I highly recommend that be the first thing you go to. Try to catch it before the line gets long because it's a capacity nightmare. which we'll talk about operations in a little bit. But just the layout of the train, the fact that they weigh all the riders, relax, your weight's not going to go up on a screen for everybody to see, but they do weigh everybody that gets on so they can distribute it right.
It's no different than getting on a water slide sometimes.
Yeah.
They weigh you too. No different. But yeah, no, I applaud Knoebels for committing to that ride because it took several years for it to open.
Yeah, and the more I heard of the backstory, I think it was a 7-year construction process, and the hardest part was them figuring out the right kind of wood where they wouldn't end up with those inner layers rotting because of the moisture, because Pennsylvania can get a lot of rain.
Yeah. Yeah, and then just the weight of the trains and the wheels and stuff is going to cause grooves and stuff in the wood. And so, I mean, there's a reason you don't see very many of these out there. And I would hate to see what Knoebels' maintenance bill is on this because it looks like they probably spend a pretty penny on this. And the cars, they design the cars themselves too, right?
Yeah, and the cars are beautiful. Some of the prettiest cars you'll see on a coaster. And even again, the queue for this one winds through the structure of the ride too. And they've got a lot of, old pictures of, because, the wooden bobsled was popular back, early 1900s.
Right.
They had pictures of some of the older ones, trying to show what they were going for when they built this. So they really put a lot of thought into how they went about doing that.
That's cool. And then that only leaves one left.
We got two. We haven't talked Impulse yet.
You're right. We kind of briefly brought up Impulse. Let's talk about that one next. Let's talk about Impulse because I would say, in terms of popularity, I would say this is probably the second most popular coaster in terms of people just know it because it just stands out. The color of it, the look of it.
It in the park. It's the strangest looking thing. Like, again, you turn that corner into this field of a parking lot, and it looks like a fair, and then there's this blue and yellow roller coaster.
Modern coaster. And for those of you who maybe have seen pictures of this, it looks like a Gerstlauer Infinity or Eurofighter. It is not.
It's not.
It's actually a Zire who built Verbolten and a lot of family rides of family coasters. But they built this, so it's a little bit different than what a regular Eurofighter or something would be.
Yeah, it's got a little bit of a rattle to it, which is, I've ridden Verbolten so many times, and I'm kind of used to that Zaire rattle because Verbolten's got it too. It's also the only roller coaster I've ever seen use a booster seat. There is a certain height range that if your child falls into, they will put a booster seat on the train and your child can ride.
What?
Dead serious.
Comment down below, guys. Is this a good idea or a bad idea? That is crazy.
Yeah, I saw them break it out while I was in line for it, and I was like, they're doing what?
If anybody has pictures or video, post links down below. Okay, we want to see that. I want to see this.
Especially considering, this is like a Gerstlauer Eurofighter, lap bar only, multiple inversions, and booster seats.
Oh wow! Now I've heard that this ride can get kind of forceful, especially in the Cobra roll. Is this true?
This ride snuck up on me. Because it's not an incredibly long ride, but the inversions come at you pretty quickly. And when you hit the last one, at least for me, I was pretty disoriented by the end of the ride.
Really?
Yeah. And I think it had more to do with the forcefulness than the actual maneuvering. But again, you're looking at one of these 2-row trains, and it packs a punch. It surprised me.
Yeah, that's what a lot of people say. But what I like about it is that it's forceful, but it stands alone in its own as its own coaster. There, it's an inversion machine, and that's what it's trying to do. I really love those zero G rolls that these types of coasters usually put in there, where they're really slow. You get that nice hang time right at the end.
Yeah, and the one on this one, it's not necessarily a slow roll, but what I like about it once they get you inverted, they keep you inverted for a few feet of track before it continues on. So you
Cool.
get that hang time without losing all of the momentum going through it.
Yeah, the only thing that I think could have made this better, since knowing that it's a Zaire coaster, Zaire, you look at Wicked at Lagoon, and you see that they did something very similar, but they did a launch up the lift hill.
Yeah.
Oh man, that would have been so neat, if they would have went with the launch lift hill model.
I would have preferred that because I think we talked about this on the Hershey episode with Fahrenheit. I'm not a fan of the vertical lift hills.
Me either. They're odd. They're really odd. I can't stand when I go to Georgia. I love Daredevil Dive. The coaster, hate the lift.
Yeah.
Hate the lift. I'm just like, get this over. And it never fails. The way you whip over the top, when you hit the bottom, there's always, I'm not going to say it's rough, but there's always a really noticeable rattle, like because of the way it whips you over the top and everything. And it's just really noticeable. So then that's going to bring us to the Mac Daddy of the park, the one that everybody talks about, that is still winning golden ticket awards for the best wooden coaster out there, which if you think about the wooden coasters we have in the world, for this thing to be getting, and recently within the last few years, it's won golden ticket for best wooden coaster last year. So tell everyone about it. It's Phoenix. Tell everyone, describe it, man, and tell us, what is the mystique about this ride?
The mystique is centered around two things: airtime combined with buzz bars. Because when you look at what the ride does, there's no overly unique elements to this wooden coaster. It's just smooth as glass and an airtime machine. Even at the end of the ride, when most wooden coasters are really starting to peter out at the end, and you get this last little run of bunny hops, and each one throws you further and further out of your seat.
Wow.
At the time I rode it, I probably weighed about 260 when I rode it. I think I spent more time half standing up than I did with my butt on the seat.
Wow.
From the time you crest the turnaround hill after the first drop, it's airtime everywhere.
Yeah, that's what everybody says. And again, so sad. I'm not gonna get this credit this year. But that's what everybody talks about. Now, do they use seatbelts on the ride? No seatbelts. It is just a buzz bar.
Just a buzz bar.
Oh man. Buddy.
I honestly believe if they used seatbelts, or if they went to the newer style restraints on a wooden coaster, this ride would plummet down people's lists. Because without that freedom of movement, even though you feel the airtime, you wouldn't, I've never felt like I was closer to standing up than sitting down on a ride until I rode Phoenix.
So that happened. Remind me after the show, I got to send you a clip of me on Viper at Six Flags Great America.
Okay.
Because there's a little speed hump, and they use the PTC trains, and I don't know if you've ever heard. Well, I'm sure you have. You're a coaster enthusiast. The PCT trick. So I gave myself. I didn't tighten the seatbelt. I'm not recommending this, anyone. I'm not recommending this. I'm not saying to do this. It could be dangerous. Okay, don't do what I'm about to say. But I took my throws to the max. I didn't tighten my seatbelt, and I left about this much room from my leg to the restraint. So it would be, in my mind, the closest I could get to what a buzz bar would be, right? Yeah. I'm standing, like you're saying. So and that's one moment, right? That was that extreme. I can't imagine 4, 5, 6 moments where it's just hitting you left and right of just standing up. How is that safe for kids, man?
I I got off of it, and the first thing I was thinking is, man, my oldest daughter would love this. Then I'm thinking, yeah, I can't tell my wife how much airtime this thing gets. um,
Right.
as a parent, my instinct would be to have my arm in front of her. Um, I think it's I want to say it's a 42-inch height limit. So I mean, you can't be tiny and get on it, but you also don't have to be real big either.
I
Um,
got a I got a 5-year-old nephew, and he's like 48 inches.
yeah.
This was going to be the season he was going to get to go upside down on some coasters. So I would love to take him out there. He at 3.5 years old. Well, at 2 years old, he was at Cedar Point
Oh,
getting
wow.
Woodstock Express and getting
Mhm.
those. He's tall for his age. So at 2 years old, he was already riding coasters, and um, at 3.5, he was 3.5, maybe 4.
Mhm.
He was just tall enough. He was 42 inches, and we took him on the Screaming Eagle at with 3.5, 4 years old, and you're on Screaming Eagle down 90-foot drops is
Yeah.
like, and this kid loves this stuff. I mean, he just lights up. So man, I'd love to take him on something like Phoenix. And like you said, I would hold him the whole time, but
Yeah,
just
there's that protection instinct would kick in for sure. Let me also say, I mean, I know where I rank Phoenix on my list of Woodies. It's at the top, but I completely get why there is some consternation amongst the enthusiast community. Is well, why isn't El Toro or you know and some other really good wooden coasters that are out there, because there are some great wooden coasters. For me, I think what does it with Phoenix is it's a throwback to an era of a simple coaster,
yeah.
and it is just done about as well as you can do it. And the fact that they're allowed to use those trains with those buzz bars and not put seatbelts in them, it honestly it reminds me a lot of the way now Comet at Hershey Park doesn't have the airtime that Phoenix does, but when I was a kid riding Comet, it was just a buzz bar and there was no seatbelt.
Yeah.
And then they put in the stupid divider between the two seats and the seat belts and the really uncomfortable restraints, and really to me ruined a great old coaster. But
Yeah. And, so it makes you think too, because sometimes when we get to a ride, like let's take Screaming Eagle, for example, and you see, at one point in time when it first opened, it was the tallest and fastest and longest coaster in the entire world. And now we get on them and we're like, what's the big deal? Well, when you get on something like Phoenix in its original form with the buzz bars, you realize that that's why these coasters were big deals back then.
Mhm.
Because, yeah, okay, they may not be the El Toros of today, but I would argue when you're getting to rides like El Toro and people talk about, amazing airtime and all this eject airtime, it's rides like Phoenix that paved the way for that.
Oh,
It's
absolutely.
yeah, and it's rides like them that showed people you want to see some scary airtime. This was the El Toro of its day.
Hmm.
Yeah, metaphorically speaking.
Sure.
But um, this was it. And you can tell, could you imagine being around turn of the century, um everything is happening around you. All these coasters are starting to open. You have Coney Island and you have all these things that are starting to open. And then you get into the 20s. Could you imagine being an enthusiast in the 20s
Yeah.
where you could ride Crystal Beach Cyclones and you could ride stuff like that now are just legend,
Hmm.
folklore? It's like with buzz bars, everything would have buzz bars back
Yeah,
then.
and I I think that's the appeal of Phoenix is, it's a great ride, but
Yeah.
when you look at the stats aren't impressive. When you get there and look at the ride, yeah, it's a pretty roller coaster, but it doesn't. You're not look. I mean, for structure, Twister looks more impressive than Phoenix,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. But
but
Phoenix has that cool thing on top of the lift.
it does. But there's something about a classic style wooden coaster that when it's done right which they did right with Phoenix, it's also a testament to you don't have to go 200 feet. You don't have to. How many times can we flip you upside down to get a great ride?
Right.
I love those rides. Several of them would make my top 10. But, Phoenix is just, it's a different ride.
Yeah, it's a cool ride. So that's going to lead us right into our next section. We're already hinting to this. I mean, when we talk about what the best rides are in the park, obviously Phoenix is up there. Obviously, we talked about the Haunted Mansion being up there for their dark rides. And we even mentioned some of their classic flat rides that they also have. Is there any other rides that we didn't talk about really that you would throw into this category for best rides, or did we cover everything?
I think we covered everything because, anything that you could talk about as a must ride, we hit.
Right. So then we'll talk about what additions do the park need? What do you think? And I'll let you go first because I had to think about this for a while.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think the park needs?
This is hard because you want to add something to the park that doesn't take away from the charm that the park has. So they don't need another dark ride. They've got a great one. They don't need another wooden coaster. They've got 3. This is going to be really different, to be honest. I'm not going to go RMC single rail, which, we could potentially. To pair along with Impulse, I could see them, because I don't think it would be terribly expensive, one of the new style Vekoma SLCs.
Oh.
One of the smaller models, nothing huge, because again, anything too big is going to take away from the atmosphere of Knoebels. And the reality is, as great as the rides are, part of what makes Knoebels is that atmosphere.
Yeah. Oh, totally. Okay. I could see that. That would be a cool addition. I think really, because we're both talking about coasters. So what additions to the park need is also going to bleed into, it's the same thing. What do we think the next coaster is to be installed? This is the same category here. So I too look at their lineup and say, they've got 3 wooden coasters, and all of them stand out on their own. They need a steel coaster. They need something, but like you said, it can't be too big. It cannot take away from the amazing wood coasters that they have. So I said, well, what do they not have? They don't have a launch coaster in the park. And I thought, well, what could we do that wouldn't break the bank and would add to the more carnival aspect of the park? I came up with a Premier Skyrocket 2.
Yeah.
Because I think that doesn't take away. It'll pair very nicely with Impulse, and all of a sudden Impulse makes more sense. It's not going to break the bank, but it's not too much. Right. Yes, it's tall. It's 150 feet tall, but it's not a mile where it's not a big B&M. It's a small footprint, and vertically, I think you can make it look really nice, especially over there by Impulse, if you could find space.
Yeah.
I think it would look really nice. I think they would balance things out. And it gives you that launch coaster. So I would say a Skyrocket 2, and they're kind of cloned for parks like this.
Yeah. And to be honest, that would have been my second choice behind what I went. I like the Skyrocket 2s. I just see too many of them popping up right now.
For sure. Well, we could always put a Larson looper in.
Please don't.
That's another debate for another time. I got to do a mid-course debate on that. That's what me and Rocco got to do next. We got to do one about we should take flat ride things that could be flat rides or coasters in people's minds. Either way, and we should just debate them. That'd be really neat. So yeah, so those are the next coasters. That's the next additions we think they need. They need something to balance that. Impulse just grossly is out of place there, and we got to make it make more sense. Now we're going to jump into the next section, which is food. We already briefly talked about this. All of the different food places look, a lot of the buildings look like the food they're serving. Did you have any food there? If so, what were some of the standouts?
I'll be honest, I had an order of fries halfway through my day and a drink. They are, I mean, Knoebels is well known for their food. They are typically very high up in the Golden Ticket Awards for best food.
Yep.
When you're competing with Dollywood and Busch Gardens for food, you're doing your food right.
Yep.
The most famous thing that I hear people talk about is their tiger tail, which is some kind of crazy dessert that everybody raves about.
Yeah.
They look fantastic. I just did not have one the day I was there.
Yeah. I just think, just it's noteworthy just to mention those buildings and just to say,
there's a reason a lot of people go to fairs because the food is just so stinking good at fairs. Knoebels is really good fair food.
Yeah.
It's the best way to describe it. There's nothing elaborate about it. There's nothing, overly unique. They just do it well.
And again, because there's no admission cost to the park, if you're a family that lives locally and you just want to go out to eat for the night and you just want to go and have some greasy fair food or whatever, you can just head over to Knoebels, get some food, and then leave. And just be in the atmosphere. That's really neat about this park.
You could probably spend less to eat dinner at Knoebels than at most sit-down restaurants in the area.
Yes. And be outside and have all the sights and sounds of an amusement park, which is really neat. We will go into our next section as well, which is operations, which is our last section before we end the show. One thing we mentioned, there is no admission cost. It is a pay per ride system, or you can get a unlimited wristband. One wristband has everything but the coasters. One has everything but that includes the coasters, except for that one Haunted Mansion ride. Everything else is included. But why don't you talk about the operations in terms of, dispatches and, are the ride ops, are they mean? Are they stapling people? Are they, talk about
it. As far as the ride ops, I did not come across anybody that was not pleasant to be around. Everybody seemed to enjoy their job. And we've been raving about Knoebels for the last 50 minutes now. This is the one area I'm going to ding them on. Their dispatches are slow. At least the day I was there, it wasn't overly crowded. It was so not crowded that both Phoenix and Twister were only running one train.
Wow.
And I've got maybe one or two people in front of me in line for Twister, and it takes me 15 minutes to get on.
Wow.
Now, granted, Twister is probably about a 2.5 minute ride, but they were just slow getting people in and out of the trains. Part of it was, I was waiting for a specific row, so there were other rows, and if they saw people coming up the walk, they were going to wait to see if they piled into empty rows. So that slowed it down. But they just weren't really quick getting trains out. And Phoenix was about a 30-minute wait, where if they had been running two trains, they could have probably cut that wait in half easily. I will say the dispatches on Phoenix were pretty well timed. But your star ride, unless the park's dead, should always have two trains on it, in my opinion.
I agree.
Flying turns is,
Well, that's the disadvantage sometimes of a family-run park, of a small park. When you go to these chains, they're used to dealing with massive crowds. They have more money to dump into employees and training and the whole thing. So, when you go to a Cedar Fair or Six Flags, even in the Six Flags park, generally speaking, they're trying to pump people out of the station. But when you get to some of these family-run parks, just because in general their mindset is very much relaxed compared to a major chain, that translates down to operations and dispatches. I've experienced that a lot.
Yeah, and I think Twister and Flying Turns were the two worst that I saw. The Flying Turns, the system of having to weigh people and make sure the weight's dispersed properly, that slows it down. But then it's three cars per train, so maximum of 6 people per train.
Yeah.
And that's assuming that you don't have to split up a pair of people because the weight would be too high. Which is, again, that's why I said hit Flying Turns first when you go to the park, because it's going to have a line because of that system.
For sure. And I assume what helps Phoenix too is the fact that it is just a buzz bar.
Oh yeah. It's a matter of once that bar's down, all they have to do is walk the line and tug on it and make sure it's not coming all the way up. And
and since it's not all the way on your, saving those, that little bit of space that you would if it was a PTC train where you have to check each restraint, you have to bend down more to do those.
Yeah.
And that just takes more time to do. It's much easier if you can just stand up and just go through the train, just 1, 2, 3, check them real quick.
Yeah.
That's, it's a shame when you hear that operations aren't running as fast as they can. However, we're going to give them a pass because they have so much more good going for them.
And I think that's the thing. I was probably a little bit more high stress the day I was there because I had literally, with the way my day was lined out, I had 3 hours to get the coaster credits and get back on the road.
Yeah.
It took me an hour to get on Flying Turns. So I was nervous the rest of the day trying to get through, and I wanted to make it so Phoenix would be credit number 100 and all that good stuff.
But it all aligned. It all worked.
It did. And it's, if you're there for the whole day, slow dispatches aren't going to be the end of the world because it's a relaxed park. And they handle impulse pretty well, especially when you consider the fact that sometimes they're pulling a booster seat in and out.
Yeah.
But
cool.
it small family run park, if you're expecting just snappy operations, you get that out of your mind before you go and just enjoy the park for what it is.
Yep. Think of it more of like a fair, guys.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's going to bring us to the end of this episode. And we are going to give our overall thoughts. I'll go first. And as always, we'll have Chris close us out here. Overall thoughts, charming. And just, I want to go because, like I said, it's like Roller Coaster Tycoon 2. That is my game of choice. I love that game. I want to be in, a livable, real version of that. That's the closest thing. And from an enthusiast point of view, I've got to get on Phoenix. It's just one of those bucket list things that I just have to do in life. So I would say get out to even if you don't like rides, you don't like roller coasters, if you're just looking for something to do, if you just want to go and have fun with your family, get to Knoebels. And that's what I would say, just charming family owned park that does pack some punch. And Chris, why don't you close us out for this episode?
Overall thoughts on the park. It's easily the most unique park I've ever been to. That alone makes it worth getting there to check it out. It's the kind of park that you can take the whole family to, grandma, grandpa, because again, nobody has to pay to get in. You only pay if you're going to ride or if you're going to eat. And there's something for everybody to do. It's a park that they know who they are and they don't try to be something else. They've even got, there's a small museum in the park that kind of takes you through the history. There's markers in the park of areas where, because there's a river that runs through that area and the park is flooded several times.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And they've actually got, markers on certain posts where it'll tell you the water level was here and when the water level was there.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So they know where they've come from, what they've done. And you just have to experience it in person to fully appreciate how cool of a place it is to go.
Well said. I think everybody definitely needs to experience this park, myself included.
Yes,
man. It didn't happen this year, the East Coast trip, but it's gonna happen. I'm planning it probably for next year.
Yeah, we got to get you out to these parks so we can catch up.
Yeah, for sure. We got to, and vice versa. I got to get you out to here so you can get to some of these parks out here because they're awesome too.
Yeah.
So guys, that's going to do it for this episode. We talked about Knoebels. This has been Talk Around the Park. And remember, guys, Chris is involved with a group on Facebook called Coaster Appreciation Society. Head over there. If you guys like this kind of talk, if you guys just want to, nerd out and just have fun with coasters and theme parks, head over to Coaster Appreciation Society and join their group. Guys, remember to always take your thrills to the max, because this is Thrill Maxx.